Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Tuesday, August 13th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris, Britt Giroli here with you. On this episode, we dig into a few pressing questions, including who would be on a Team USA roster for the 2028 Olympics if we can build it with major league players. Maybe it's a pipe dream, but there are some stars that want it to happen, so we figured we'd go through the process of actually putting together a lineup of who could be on that team 4 years from now. We're going to check in on the NL West, which is going to be a battle over the final month and a half of the season. And we're going to take a look at the possibility that a few teams followed the Angels' lead from last August and cut payroll using the waiver wire during the second to last month of the season. Kind of a new thing we saw last year in mass. Maybe one or two teams could try to follow that this year. Let's get right after it, though. Team USA in 2028. When I bring that up, Britt, who are the first few names that pop into your head as current stars that will still be good and are very likely to be on that team if we do, in fact, see major leaguers in the Olympics 4 years from now?
Yeah, well, I think we're lucky in the game's at a place where so many of these young stars are up here already. It might have been very difficult to predict even 10 years ago. But I think of Bobby Witt Jr., I think of Jackson Holliday, I think of Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, right? I think of all these guys who have yet to hit their prime, and they could be in their prime years when we look down the road 4 years from now. I think, and we did this yesterday, spoiler alert, this all came out of our pre-podcast show yesterday. As you guys know, predicting pitchers is very difficult. Outside of Paul Skeens, who, if he stays healthy, I think we all know could be one of the best pitchers in baseball. You can make that case probably already. But so difficult to predict what these young arms are going to do. Guys in the minor leagues, guys who haven't really figured it out yet. We see this every year. Will all of a sudden add a new pitch or add 15 pounds. And Mason Miller with the A's is a great example, and kind of almost come out of nowhere. And all of a sudden they're in the All-Star game. So I have a really difficult time with the pitching side of things. I think there's so many young position players in the game that you can fill out a pretty good roster if we're talking about Team USA guys. And then you can make the case for some of these veterans that I think need to be in the Olympics, whether or not they're in their prime, even if it's a reserves, bench spots. I think some of these guys who are stars today should be in the next Olympics if they want to. And I think there's a pretty big push for players that want to play, big league players that want to find a way to play in LA in 2028.
Yeah, I think there's some precedent for this in other sports. Diana Taurasi, I believe, just got her 6th gold or something. So I don't think she played at all. I was even surprised to see her in uniform for women's basketball, but she was on the team. And so, you're kind of your own personal Snoop Dogg in a way. You could have Bryce Harper, Aaron Judge. Also, the way the baseball works is so great with DH and first base. You can likely have somebody that's a little bit older that kind of represents that energy. And I think if we're building this lineup, even if Bryce Harper, he does project, we got these projections that are kind of fun from Dan Szymborski. Thank you very much, Dan. These are Zips projections for 2028, sorted by WAR, and then with a focus on American players. And what you see here is Bryce Harper is projected to be a below average player in 2028 with an above average OPS, but no defensive value. Same thing for Judge. And so, in those cases, I think Harper talking about wanting to do the Olympics, being some energy behind it. Yeah, you put him on the team, even if, theoretically you could have Michael Harris playing first base or something stupid. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make sense to keep some of these people out, even if whatever the projections are. But to your point on pitching, and this is just to read this off for people who are listening, the projections for 2028 say Gunnar Henderson #1, Bobby Witt Jr. #2. I think that's not a surprise, and that's going to be the foundation of the team if that allows this to happen. But there are some surprises below. Riley Green is 3rd. Kobe Mayo is 5th. Jackson Merrill would be the center fielder for this team. Corbin Carroll tied with Jackson Merrill with 4 wins projected in 2028. Mason Wynn might be the backup shortstop on this team if we just go by projections. But there's Rutschman. Carson Williams is the prospect on this list, along with Kobe Mayo. So it's harder for me to believe because there is a bust rate associated with prospects, and this is the projection system just liking something about them as prospects. But Jordan Westberg, Pete Crow Armstrong at the bottom. Those are a fun couple of names that have defensive value, are pretty solid players, and you have to kind of imagine yourself 4 years from now. There's going to be some growth in some of these players.
5 Orioles position players on that list of top end players generated by Zips. Yeah, really cool that Dan sent that over because it just gives you an idea. Like, we like to assume that the stars of today will be the stars of tomorrow and the stars of 4 years from now, but everyone ages a little bit differently. And even if you go from elite to very good, or very good to good, or good to just average, that's going to make a difference over time, right? I find that the most difficult players to predict aren't necessarily the young guys. I'm with Britt, like Witt, Henderson, they seem like locks. I think you'll have guys like Harper and Judge kind of anchoring it from a veteran perspective too. They'll be in their mid-30s by then. I think it's looking at someone like Austin Riley, who's reeled off a stretch of 3 straight 5 WAR seasons prior to this year. This is a down year for Austin Riley. He's 27 right now. When he's 31, what kind of player is he going to be? Is he still going to be a 3 or 4 win player? Could he actually make this team? So you look for those middle guys. They could be tough. I think Kyle Tucker is still going to be a really good player 4 years from now because there's not a lot of swing and miss in his profile. So I think that's the type of stuff that I'm always looking at, is like, what kind of hitter are you, and how does that usually age? And does that give you enough of a chance to still be good enough down the road? The pitching thing Britt brought up, we'll spend more time on the hitters today because that's the bulk of the focus. The relievers are almost impossible. Who's going to be a good reliever 4 years from now? Like, the best relievers in the game right now, 4 years ago, largely were irrelevant. Not entirely, but there are some major pop-up guys every single year. And as all pitchers do, they break down, but they also have their stuff deteriorate pretty quickly because they rely heavily on 1 or 2 pitches in most cases. So what works today doesn't necessarily work 3 and 4 years down the road.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah.
I was thinking about this. There's no like Mariano Rivera, right? Where we're going to see like a 10-year stretch of excellence, right? Like,
I guess Jansen is our guy now, but we're not putting him on the team 4 years from now.
Yeah.
He'll be on Team USA.
Yeah.
It's weird. There's
right
not one automatic guy, right? But I can't even tell you who's going to be a good reliever next year. Like, managers will tell you that bullpens are so cyclical that if you have a good reliever one year, you're almost better like dumping him because chances are he's not going to have that year again.
That's
like,
kind of seems what the Rays do.
It's kind of like a big baseball, like, I don't want to say trend, but yeah, many people feel that way, that like you got somebody, will sell high because you don't think he's going to sustain it. So if we have trouble projecting the bullpens for next season, 4 years out, it's just wild, right? I think you can maybe look at starters, like we mentioned Skeens, but how many Paul Skeens are there that were like, this guy's good, he's young, he's going to be a star for a while as long as he stays healthy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I know 2020 was a weird year, but it is 4 years from now, so backwards. So I just thought it would be instructive for me to just read out the top 10 relievers in 2020. Liam Hendricks, Devin Williams, Raisel Iglesias, Brad Hand, James Karinchak, Mike Myers, Evan Marshall, Edwin Diaz, Jose Cisnero, and Trevor Rosenthal. So how many? So Devin Williams is still playing. Liam Hendricks might get back on. Raisel Iglesias. So the top 3 were still around, but then you hit, basically you're almost 0 for 7 after that. In terms of, 1 for 7 after that.
And how many of those guys are making like a quote unquote all-star team now?
Right. Yeah, that too. I mean, Liam Hendricks might come back and pitch again, but is he going to be Liam Hendricks the same way?
Totally.
I mean, that's irrelevant for the American team probably, but still just giving you the idea. And on the starting pitching side, just as bad. But you could have your sort of Bryce Harper of pitching, where somebody, one of the name I put forth for us is Zach Gallen, is like somebody who will be in his early 30s, but I think might age okay because he has lots of different pitches. He has good command. And, if Zach Gallen is still pitching and he's interested in this, then you could have him as sort of the professor emeritus. Even if you have mostly younger people on the team other than him. But this is the top 10 pitching in 2020. Shane Bieber, Yu Darvish, Jake DeGrom, Trevor Bauer, Dinelson Lamet, Luis Castillo, German Marquez, Zach Greinke, Dylan Bundy, Kenta Maeda. Can drop a little Brandon Woodruff and Lucas Giolito on there at 11 and 12. I mean, injuries in pitching are it's a big part of the chaos there. You just don't know who's going to age gracefully in terms of ligaments and muscles and all those things. So the bottom of that list was all full of injury. Woodruff with the thoracic outlet. Dylan Bundy just lost all his velo pretty much.
Yeah.
Greinke was nearing the end of his career. You probably wouldn't have picked Greinke to be good 4 years from then, but it's not a great list.
And then that's part of the problem too, is like gone are the days of like the Scherzer Verlanders where you get this 10-year run, who I think we could both, all admit are not making the next Olympics. They'll be well past their prime, but they had this like really long stretch of consistency.
Yeah,
that just is not how the game operates.
Or if it is not gone, then it's not super obvious to us right now who is the next Justin Verlander or Max Scherzer. You know what I mean?
Correct. I think it's more of that. Yeah, I don't think the pitchers are just like gone, but I think you don't know who they are until they kind of weather a storm in their early to mid 30s and then come out of it on the other side still pitching well. Because there was the point where we thought Justin Verlander was done. Remember when Verlander had the core muscle surgery, had kind of back-to-back rough years in Detroit? It looked like it might have been the beginning of the end for him. And then, of course, he's had an amazing run in the time since then, mostly in Houston. But if you look at Corbin Burns right now, like he's 29, okay, 4 years from now, he's 33. It's not impossible that Corbin Burns is still good enough to be on this team 4 years from now.
He could still be dominant. I mean, it's gonna mean a lot about his velo. Does he keep his velo, and does he not get hurt? If he did both of those things, then he might still be as dominant.
Because he's closing in, like right now, he had 167 in 2021, 202 in 2022, 193. No, these are innings. 193 innings in 23. He's at 149 and 2/3.
I mean, he's a horse in today's standards.
Right. Like, so he's at least kind of like ticking those boxes where top end performance, workload over a pretty long stretch, but if you had to wager on it, you'd say, don't know if I'm betting on guys in there.
I'll believe it when I see it, sort of deal.
Right. So you skew younger when you look at the pictures. You're like, well, Skeens and Spencer Strider coming off of elbow surgery. If he's still healthy, we could probably assume he has a role. Hunter Green looks like
there's some risk with Skeens, Strider, and Green that there's that either you take injury risk when you're trying to project 4 years out, and you take like older guys. Or you take on some risks that you don't even actually know exactly how good he is. We all think we know exactly how good Paul Skeens is, but we're not sure.
Yeah, we have no idea. We all think we know a lot more than we think than we actually do. For those of you listening to this podcast, why?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at how much Spencer Strider has been dominant, but like for how long? You know? Like, just think about Hunter Green. We have Hunter Green as a possible on this list because he looks really good right now. But the last 2 years he wasn't that good. Would he have been somebody we want on the team if you're talking about the top 5 starters, American starters in America and MLB right now? You might not have put him on there before. So there's talent risk, and then there's injury risk. And when you're trying to evaluate pitchers 4 years out, it's just the combination of the two is really tough. I'm surprised that anybody gets a 6-year deal, as a pitcher.
Yeah, and this is why it's so hard to draft pitchers too. I think even making this list gives you a new appreciation for like teams drafting pitchers, doesn't it? Because it's like, well, I don't know. Like, is it?
It's almost like I have to do it, but like I don't know that any of these are going to work out. Like we have some prospects that we might put on this list, but geez, I think Jackson Jobe is awesome, but what do I know?
It's just sort of baking into the expectation, similar to the 2028 Zips hitters, where you say, okay, there's going to be some names on here we haven't seen in the big leagues yet, because that's just how it works. Like if we went back just a year or two ago, we wouldn't have necessarily expected Gunnar Henderson to be a lock on this team 2 years ago. But now he looks like he's clearly going to be one of the best players in the game, even 4 years from now, because he's already ascended to that level. I took the initial run at the first 13. Were there any names I put on there, younger names, where you were like, ooh, that's interesting, but I'm not sure? I had James Wood, Wyatt Langford, Royce Lewis, Jackson Holliday. You mentioned him, Britt. I think he's pretty safe, as much as you can say that about a projecting a guy that's barely been in the big leagues. But who of that group gives you the most pause, because we've seen so little of most of them at the big league level?
I don't know. We have such like recency bias though, because a month ago, would we have said Jackson Holliday was a lock?
Right? It would have been in the category of he's done amazing things in the minors. The projections are going to spit out some really good numbers, and he'll have time to reach that level. I think that those pieces are still in place, even with that bad 10-game run, because he's been great in the minor leagues, like elite of the elite, age to level production at every stop. So I think we still would have been excited, but I think we have a little more confidence in the heat of a recent return to the big leagues where he's having that success now.
I think that's fair. I thought your list was good. I think honestly, it's such a guess. I think we all kind of came to the same sort of agreements on most of these position players. I think for people listening, wondering like what we did roster wise, I think we assumed 26 because I think if MLB does agree to let baseball players, pro players, guys that are on 40-man rosters, which hasn't been the case lately, I think they're going to push for that 26 because it will, in theory, keep these guys a little bit healthier, having the extra pitcher, having the extra position player. The last time in the last Olympics, it was only 24 on every roster, right? So that changes what we're doing if you're going to lose a pitcher, lose a position player. I do think, again, for people listening, wondering, like, why are we wasting our time? There's a huge push by Casey Wasserman at CAA to get players that are currently on a big league team to play. Bryce Harper's been very vocal about it. Many stars have been very vocal about wanting to play, and it actually could slot in, people think, in the All-Star break. They'd have an extended All-Star break. LA obviously already has the facilities. That was the issue in Paris with Dodger Stadium. So there is like a real chance that this happens. And we know baseball's in at least the next two Olympics. It's in LA.
You need to have a bunch of games on a couple of days. Like you could do Anaheim too. So
yes. And they have talked about having WBC, the next WBC, there'll be one in the interim. I think 2026. Is that the next WBC? They talked about having qualifiers there so that, it was a very condensed schedule so that players who play in it would only be gone for a week. It's not a 3-week sojourn. Like
we talked a little bit
Olympics.
about this, and I think you'd have to have it so that there was only, 8 teams that make it or something. You know? And maybe you could do something with, a loser's bracket so that 8 teams, you could lose once and still win the whole thing.
Yeah,
but
you would think they would want to do it though, because if you're the IOC, Shohei Ohtani, you don't want Shohei Ohtani to play in the next Olympics, right?
Yeah.
Think of all these huge stars. We're talking about US here, but obviously there's huge stars.
I think for baseball, the value judgment is a little bit more complicated because they wouldn't want Shohei Ohtani, for example, to be injured playing in that. But like we said, injuries can happen anytime. And also there is, I think, a lot of value for baseball to be in the Olympics in terms of like, you want to grow the game. The world watches the Olympics, not having your best stars in there is meaningful. Why do you think, all these soccer players are allowed to play in it? Because soccer knows that this is a good thing to have their best players in it.
Yeah. Hockey lets it happen. Don't they build in a break?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think this is impossible, and it seems like there are enough forces behind it where it's less of a pipe dream than it's been in the past, right? You have the right kinds of players on board that want to be a part of it too. Aaron Judge is a fascinating case because he is doing things right now that are, unusual for even a great power hitter, right? He might make another run to the 60 home run range. He hit 62 2 years ago. He's got a shot to do the same thing this year. He's going to be 36 years old 4 years from now. There's a big question about Judge in general, like how's he going to age? And there have always been questions about, as a bigger player, is he more susceptible to injuries? But sometimes I think we get so caught up in those questions with Judge that we're not fully enjoying what he is doing on the field. He's just been ridiculous. This is the third consecutive season in which Aaron Judge has hit a barrel rate above 25%. That is absolutely absurd. So my question for both of you is, how do you think Aaron Judge is going to age? And does he just kind of fit into that Bryce Harper bucket of, yeah, even if he's not this version of Judge, he's such a star and such an important part of USA baseball, air quotes, as we kind of try to project this, that he's there even if he's not one of the 5 or 7 best position players on the team anymore?
I guess I don't know. One thing of just about the quality of his play. Since free agency began in 1974, we've had 10 seasons where a player had a WRC plus of 200 or better. That means that they're twice as good as the average player. I mean, they're 100 points better or better. And so in that group, there are 2 people who have done it twice. We all know one of them, Barry Bonds.
Yeah.
4 times. But Aaron Judge is in the middle of doing it his second time. And basically him and Barry Bonds are the top 6. Then you have Jeff Bagwell, Frank Thomas, Mark McGwire, and Juan Soto rounding out the top 10. So, Judge, deserves all of the flowers. In terms of how he'll age, I think that what we'll see is most likely something along the lines of Mike Trout, where it's harder for him to stay on the field, but when he's on the field, he's hitting well. And he's sort of, at some point, maybe at that point, he'll be a DH defensively. But I think he'll still be able to, be your DH and slug you 35 homers or whatever, still, even at that age. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's on Team USA if he wants to be in 2028, and he's the DH. He may be the captain of the team. Harper may be the captain of the team, right? They may be the heart and souls of that squad. But I think both of those guys, like we said, are more, I don't want to say figureheads, but are also there for an element of nostalgia and stars. And I still think he's going to be, I think both of these guys, especially Judge, are still going to be like, hey, you make a mistake, he will make you pay for it. Mm-hmm. But we all know that defense and base running declines first for players. Those are the first skills that they lose. So I do think in 4 years, you're looking at Aaron Judge as, purely a hitter when you are talking about him versus he still may play the field for the Yankees on occasion. He still might play it a lot. I mean, I'm not really sure how their roster shakes out in 2028. I haven't given it a lot of thought, but I think for the best of the best, he's a bat and Harper is a bat / first base. And those guys are still scary hitters. They're lethal hitters. They're like Albert Pujols, right? You couldn't make a mistake to Albert Pujols at the end. He actually hit really well, but he was not the Albert Pujols of yesteryear. That's kind of how I see those 2 guys.
And I think, 4 years ago, the batting leaderboard tells us a pretty different story. It tells us that if we're underrating anybody for this roster, it might be a veteran. Because 4 years ago, Fernando Tatis Jr., Jose Ramirez, Freddie Freeman. Freddie Freeman was the 3rd best hitter 4 years ago. Jose Abreu, of course, there's our loss, but Mookie Betts, Trey Turner, Manny Machado, Marcelo Zuna, Anthony Rendon, another loss, Mike Trout, 10th. So that's 8 out of the 10 very best batters in 2020 are still really good batters now. And so we may find that if we are undervaluing anybody in this search for who's going to be great in 2028, it's somebody who ages gracefully. And it could be somebody like Judge or Harper, or there could be somebody else that we're not necessarily thinking of this year. If we're looking, I guess it would be maybe for players that are like 27 to 30 right now that are just going to age better than we think. And, guys on that list include, let's see here, Jarren Duran, Brent Rooker.
No.
No. Well, here's my question. Freddie Freeman's probably going to play for Canada. Yeah. But is Mookie Betts too old? What would he be, 34, 35? Would Mookie Betts be on Team USA?
Yeah, exactly. Like that
that's
another
a good
guy,
question,
yeah. He'll
right?
be 35. Same kind of situation as Harper and Judge in a lot of ways, where it's like chances are Yeah, actually, just based on what he's done up to this point and how
what will Corey
he's getting there.
how will Corey Seager age? Like, we think he'll just be injured a lot, but what if he's just a good first baseman or something at that point. So there's some names on this sort of veteran list that will be surprising and will still be really good in 4 years.
Yeah, fun exercise though, nonetheless, and more to come on that front here as the week unfolds.
Brent Rooker, no.
I'd love it just from I'd be happy for him. It'd be amazing.
It would be surprising.
But the biggest thing, so I think for me, the tactical part of this exercise, if you're using, projection brain, fantasy baseball brain, you're looking at swing and miss and how poorly swing and miss will age over 4 years. And even doing all the damage that he's doing right now, Brent Rooker is sitting with a 29.9% K rate, and he's already 29 years old. So
that's part of why Mookie might be a better bet. It's like he'll at least be making contact, and since he runs well now, even if he runs a little bit worse, like he still won't be like a plotter,
Right. That's why the Mookie and Kyle Tucker I think are a little bit easier to project as still
like
being
Mookie versus Jackson
hitters.
Holiday at second base is a really interesting one, I think. Because with Jackson Holiday, we're baking in so much he hasn't done yet.
Yeah, we are.
And we're just assuming that in 4 years he's going to be great and not like a historic bust, which I'm not
or
saying
just an okay player. Right. He could be an average player. Yeah.
And Mookie could just be declining super gracefully and still be better than Jackson Holiday, even though there's a huge age difference.
It's possible. I think the name I put on the list that I'm unsure about just because of poor health is Royce Lewis. I mean, Royce Lewis.
Oh, I had that circled. I was thinking Mason Wynn would make a better group thing there because, there is going to be somebody who makes this team for defensive reasons, And I know you have Bobby Witt and Gunnar Henderson that could both be shortstops, but 4 years from now, they might not both be shortstops.
Yeah, that's a fair question. I had a backup catcher. I had Patrick Bailey on here because I thought.
Right. That makes sense. He may not be a star, but you need a good American backup catcher, and who are you going to pick that fits the bill right now? So I think that's my Mason Wynn is my Patrick Bailey for this team. It's like going to be a shortstop, going to probably be a good defensive shortstop, may want to have that arm on your bench too.
Why did he put Royce Lewis on there? 32 homers in 440 plate appearances as a big league player. That is a difference maker with the bat if he can string together a few years of better health. I mean, multiple torn ACLs is just horrible luck. Like there's a component of that's just unbelievably bad luck. We'll see if he has hamstrings and quads, which, this other soft tissue stuff.
We'll see if he still has hamstrings and quads.
Yeah, we'll see if he still has them 4 years from now. 4 years from now, hey, the future.
4 years from now, we'll all have bionic hamstrings.
Maybe we'll have better treatments, better replacement quads and hamstrings available for these nagging injuries. But more to come on Team USA in 2028. Hopefully some kind of confirmation at some point. I don't know, in the next year that this will actually happen because we'll get fired up about it when it does. I missed the Olympics already, by the way. I loved it as something different to watch, especially with the time change, being in the Midwest, games being in Paris. You could wake up, turn on, watch live stuff. I didn't even care what it was on. It was amazing. Every event I watched.
Fun to see bizarre sports. I mean, breakdancing. We watched some ping pong.
Yeah. Just turn it on. Enjoy it. Handball. I watched a hockey final.
One thing I really did dislike though was it was really hard to find something you actually wanted. Like if you wanted something specifically, it was very hard to find. I found. I don't know if it was a Hulu interaction thing, but I
had Peacock and they had all these like gold medal highlight channels and stuff that you could like really easily, I felt like sort through to find some good stuff.
Really?
And NBC's had the Olympics forever. Peacock was built for the Olympics. You could watch every event in its entirety. I was watching surfing one night and I actually got kind of bored because they have to wait a long time for a wave. It wasn't edited. It was like a 5.5 hour presentation of surfing. It's actually very relaxing.
Have on in the background.
Get Peacock next time. It had like, you could skip to just the U.S. gold medals on one channel. You could watch the gold medal highlights. They had primetime in Paris every night. Snoop had a show.
It is also very sort of American centric. Maybe that was part of my problem. I was trying to watch a basketball game that America was not involved in. And so I just couldn't find it, and maybe it was just me. Maybe it was user error, but
I think it was user error in this instance. Let's move on. Let's talk about the NL West for a bit. I think last week we were talking about the possible best teams in baseball right now. I threw the Dodgers out there as my pick. I think it's a fun question because we named 3 teams, brought up 2 more, and maybe still didn't even hit the best team in baseball. River Ryan got hurt in the time since then. And no, I'm not going to throw back my statement that the Dodgers are the best team in baseball right now because I think the key still is Yoshinobu Yamamoto. They just got Mookie Betts back last night. He homered right away. So Dodgers are doing Dodger things. And Clayton Kershaw, even working with the diminished velocity, still looks like pretty darn good Clayton Kershaw to me. Like, it's so easy to underrate him. Here's my question for both of you. Where does Clayton Kershaw rank in ERA going back to the start of 2022? I set the minimum innings to 250 innings, so that way he has enough innings to qualify. Where would you say Kershaw ranks in ERA?
That dude. 3rd.
Top 10.
First. He's first by almost a quarter run. Like, not just first by a little. Where do you think he ranks in WHIP?
He's such a legend.
Well, now at first.
Yeah,
now you got us. Yeah.
He's tied for 4th in WHIP. I mean, I know you can't rely on Clayton Kershaw for 30 starts year over year, right?
Well,
but
he's still good.
When you have him, he's still just about as good as anybody. It might not be overpowering. It's not fire-breathing Paul Skeens electric stuff.
It may not be your playoff start or your playoff ace.
That's the thing. Yeah, he hasn't been good in the playoffs, and I think that has tarnished his perception a little bit.
That's kind of ridiculous, though, because it dismisses the value he still brings to the table.
I'm not saying it's not ridiculous, but I think that's where part of the perception comes.
That might be part of it, yeah.
Gotta be, but it's so
also
weird.
Just like, we see a lot of velocity everywhere else, and he's got none of it.
No, but it's still working.
Yeah.
It's still working. He's down like a half tick ish from where he was a year ago, but kind of a similar pitch mix. It's not like he's throwing 50% 4-seam fastballs at 90 miles an hour. Like he's adjusting. He's doing all the things that a great aging pitcher should do to continue making it work without the stuff that he used to have. So anyway, I think Kershaw's return, even though it's been a little bumpy at times, that's still a big lift for them. What do you make of this race right now? I think one takeaway from last week was I thought they'd have to sweat to win the division, and that looks even more true a week later because the Diamondbacks are playing well, the Padres are playing well, they just got Joe Musgrove back, and the Giants, they're in the rearview mirror, they're pretty far back, they're probably not coming back to win the division, but they're hanging around, and they're pitching, as we saw again with Blake Snell on Monday night. Their starting pitching is a problem.
Yeah, it's really interesting that if you take the last 30 days and just look at team trends in this division, it looks like there's a very clear best team in this division that's not the Dodgers. And if you sort by WRC plus over the last 30 days, the San Diego Padres are 6th with a 126 WRC plus. The Dodgers are 10th with a 108. And the Giants are 17th with a 102.
What about Arizona?
Yeah, you're right. Arizona's 2nd, 143.
Oh my God, burying the lead.
They're cooking right now. The Diamondbacks are just on fire.
On the pitching side, oh no, damn you, Arizona. On the pitching side, Arizona 2nd, San Diego 3rd. So we're making the case here for Arizona and San Diego both being better than Dodgers. Dodgers 15th in pitching WAR over the last 30 days. So, and that's the full staff. But it's hard to know exactly what to make of this in sort of 30-day trends because we've seen good teams like the Yankees look terrible for stretches. So there are just terrible stretches in every good season. There's still terrible stretches. The Dodgers could be just going through one of those. And then secondly, these rosters are dynamic and they're changing all the time. And what sort of Dodgers team are we looking at in the last 30 days? And is that the next 30 days? So that can be the same roster. And so I think that's a big question. For example, you're getting Clayton Kershaw back,
But the Padres got Joe Musgrove back last night.
Yeah, well, the Dodgers are going to get Yamamoto back.
Yeah, I know, but the Dodgers aren't the only team that's hurt, though. Darvish also could be pitching for San Diego at some point in time. Dennis Lin reported yesterday with Ken Rosenthal that he's been throwing bullpens. So I know the Dodgers have a lot of injuries, a crazy amount of injuries. But I think it's also crazy to not assume that Arizona and San Diego could also either keep this up or get slightly healthier too, right? It's not a crazy thing. It's not like Fernando Tatis and Joe Musgrove are leading the pot. Like, no, right? So,
I'm personally surprised that Arizona is second in the last 30 days in pitching WAR because, some of the components don't look like great. They don't have the greatest strikeout rate. They don't have the greatest walk rate. They have been suppressing homers really well, best in baseball. So maybe they have something there, or maybe that's just luck. I don't think the Arizona pitching staff is that great, but they are healthy now, and they have 6 starters right now. So they can even go to a 6-man rotation to maybe keep their guys healthy, or they can play around with matchups, or make Ryan Nelson like a super sub, kind of a utility pitcher. I don't know what they're going to do, but they are the healthiest of the squads and somehow second best in baseball. They are weird for me. When I look at them, I'm like, it's an okay team,
Yeah, you forgot about them. Yeah, it's easy to forget.
I didn't even look at them on the board. I was like about to do a whole Padres thing.
I don't get it. We talked about Ryan Nelson a bit on Monday's show. Brandon Pfaadt's been pitching pretty well. Zach Gallen is just Gallen. He's their ace, even if he's not a top 10 guy league-wide. He's probably easily still a top 20 pitcher. So they just get underrated. I underrated their offense like a month ago. We were looking at lineups and talking about different matchups we were trying to stay away from with our pitchers. And I thought Arizona was a matchup you could kind of mess with your kind of mid-rotation starters and live to tell the tale. Nope. They are consistently actually very good. I think what I did is I was projecting the struggles of Corbin Carroll across the entire lineup, but they've been really good. The injury to Christian Walker
has 6 homers in the last month and a 577 slugging.
Maybe he's putting it back together. And then they bring in Josh Bell and somehow on waivers to step in for Christian Walker. It's working.
Yeah,
he's got a 181 WRC plus as an Arizona Diamondback. And then you've got Jock Peterson and Ketel Marte, who are white hot. They're both hitting over 340 with 400 plus slugging and 800 slugging, 400 plus OBPs together. I mean, that's a great duo to have in the middle of your lineup. And, Jock Peterson, what did they sign him for? Like 1 and 4?
He gets underrated a lot because it's a big side platoon. It was 12 and a half, but still, it's not that much for what he brings to the table with the bat. And then Ketel Marte, he's on pace for a possible 40 home run season.
Yeah,
heck had that written down anywhere.
Isn't he kind of like back end MVP status at this point?
I mean, he should get at least a few votes. Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy because if you had said which division might be a blowout in spring training, we might have said the West because the Dodgers did so much and the Padres traded away Juan Soto, and no one really bought that Arizona could repeat what they did, right? So if I told you the Dodgers are double-digit leaders in the NL West back in February, you two would have been like, probably yeah, right? Like it's not it wouldn't have been a crazy thing if we had picked the Dodgers as having this double-digit lead because they've had double-digit leads in the NL West before. And they went and created a super team. So it's wild to me. And credit to Arizona and San Diego for putting the pedal to the metal at pretty much the right time here. And you mentioned Arizona being very healthy, so there may be a little regression there. But San Diego in particular are winning games in all kinds of ways. Jackson Merrill looks like a guy who could be rookie of the year. He hits big home runs for them. He makes big plays for them. He does not look like a guy who's in his first season in the big leagues.
Yeah.
And I think that's been huge. And you saw last night in Musgrove's debut, he didn't even go 5 innings, but it doesn't matter because their bullpen is so good that they can introduce Musgrove back into the game. He can throw like 60 pitches and they win that game 2-1 because they can trot out their like 5-headed relief monster out of the bullpen. So they're a scary team, I think, if they make it in, because like I said, they could get hurt also, but they could get healthier here. They could have Darvish, they could have Musgrove more stretched out. Fernando Tatis could carry a team for a week or two. Like they're a very scary team. And I think the more you watch them, the more you're like, 1, how was this team so bad last year? And 2, if they get in, they're going to be a hard team to beat because of how we've seen how much the bullpen and how much that can matter when it comes to the postseason, right? How much having those 4 or 5 guys to shorten those games up can have you steal games that you had no business winning, especially if your starting rotation is thin, and their starting rotation is still pretty thin.
Yeah, the other thing that is kind of cool about, and this is on the offensive side, there's a Dennis Lin piece about how they, in San Diego, they really wanted to improve their contact. Jackson Merrill's in the middle of this as a really good contact player, but I think the added dimension later in the season for Merrill has been the power. And marrying that strikeout rate with power is really the way forward, because what you see at the top of the strikeout rate leaderboard over the last 30 days is the Royals with the best strikeout rate, and the Padres tied with them basically, and then Arizona third. All three of them have above average power, because there are people on this strikeout rate list, like Washington is fourth, and you've got Cleveland seventh always. And you've got the Angels 12th. These are teams that are striking out less than average, but don't have that power aspect along with it. And if you pair power with a low strikeout rate, then you are one of the best teams in baseball offensively. The Dodgers, by the way, a 25.7% strikeout rate over the last 30 days, and that is 25th in baseball, basically tied with the Giants. So, and there are teams on that side of the leaderboard that are still okay offenses. The Dodgers still have a 108 RWRC plus. Atlanta strikes out more than anybody other than Colorado, and they still have a 107 WRC plus. But it puts a lot of pressure on your power on that side too. And you have to walk a lot. You have to do all the other things if you're going to strike out that much.
This is a weird scenario that could unfold now, but it would have helped if the Giants had found a way to win last night in that Snell-Sale matchup. But the Giants could be the last wild card. We could be in a scenario where all 4 of these NL West teams, Dodgers, Padres, D-backs, and Giants, all make the playoffs. It's lining up where it's at least possible. I mean, the Braves have that position right now, but it's going to be close. At least it looks like it's going to be close. The Braves are struggling. They're 3-7 in their last 10. They're up 2.5 on the Giants for the last wild card spot right now. Cardinals are in the mix there. The Mets are 1 back. There's other teams there because the NL's been like that all year. What's really interesting, if you look by run differential at the other teams jockeying for that spot, the Reds, even though they're 4.5 games back of the last wild card, are a plus 45 in run differential. They have the best run differential of any of the teams below that line right now that don't have a playoff spot. So I guess if I'm looking for a team that is not part of this NL West picture that could find its way back in, the Reds might be the one that look close to dead on paper that still have some life left.
Yeah, the end of season projections on Fangraphs have the Braves with 86 wins, the Giants with 82, but there's a hot stretch in there that could change things. Padres with 90, Dodgers with 95 still. So that's the kind of sober numbers based approach. But a lot of this, I think, still looks at season long trends and says, oh, well, the Dodgers have a 100 run differential and have done this over the full season. And they aren't looking at something like I'm looking at, like a last 30-day split. And that makes sense for a projection system to look at the full season and look at the full quality of the team. But I think it also makes sense as humans to look at the last 30 days and say, well, this roster over the last 30 days has performed this way. It's not like 30 days is a tiny sample. It's like a full month of kind of mediocrity from the Dodgers. So, after being a superlative team that looked like they were going to win 115 or something this year, now they've come back to earth. So, anything can really happen over this last 45 days or so. But that's what the projections say. Dodgers easily over the Padres, and 90 wins for the Padres and 89 for the Diamondbacks. And those are the 2 wild cards along with the Braves.
That easily part, it to me, the current margin's a little smaller than the projected one. And that's just, separating the current gap a little bit over the time. I don't know if I can buy that. I think it's going to be a sweat. I think it's going to go down to the final week, at least, for the division in the West, which is more exciting than a lot of years when the Dodgers have been able to get enough separation to kind of coast into the postseason. I always wonder, too, though, across all sports, are you better prepared for the postseason if you've been playing games that matter for several weeks or even a possible couple of months consecutively? Do you just have the right focus, the right mindset going in. It's not just a baseball thing necessarily.
I found very little correlation in just some of the numbers angle. Very little correlation between September records and October records.
But wildcard teams do well in the playoffs. Wildcard teams historically have fared well in the playoffs. So maybe it's not so much September record as it is just getting in. That whole mentality of just getting in.
There's a schedule component to that. Wildcards have different schedules. They kind of play all the way through without resting.
Yeah, that's where I wonder if it's the rest component. Maybe getting in, having to play the games that matter, and being a wild card is this little sweet spot where, yeah, the time off is good, and you already advanced through that first round, but you have everything just synced up the way it needs to be going in when you earned that spot through the final.
Baseball is such a daily game. There's something about it. It's like, it's so, the other sports have more days off. They have different schedules. They're more likely, you almost never ask in baseball, do we have a game today? You know what I mean? Like, you show up and you're like, oh, there's no game today? Sweet.
Turn the car around, go back home.
Yeah, there's a very much like it's like an everyday thing, and you kind of have to get into these grooves, and that's why I think teams also fall out of grooves and fall into grooves, and it's something that you can't. Numbers are not going to be are going to say no. Teams don't have hot hands because you can't pinpoint the beginning and end of a hot streak. Like, you can't predict.
But momentum is true.
You can be in one.
Yeah. You talk to any of these guys who are on a hot streak, and the ball looks like a beach ball, right?
And then you talk to guys. Texas Rangers last year. Like, were they the best team in baseball for the full season? No, but like they were. They're in the playoffs.
This is the part that you still can't. Yeah, you still can't quantify the momentum factor, I think. And we see that in other sports. You see that in March Madness, right? You see that, a little bit in, other venues. But yeah, to me, baseball is it's because they play every day.
Most often crowns the best team as the champion. Because they have full series.
Yeah, full 7-game series.
Definitely not the Super Bowl, because that's very much what team showed up today.
And there's also a big matchup question, I think, in football, because whoever you play in the playoffs, it's not like, you could just be playing a weak slate to get to the Super Bowl. And then,
Thor has some strong opinions today.
I know. Do you guys hear him? His dog walker is coming. My gosh. He's not even, I know. What's funny is that the dog walker will still have to drag him out of the house. Like, he's almost 10. Like, he acts like a tough guy behind the door. Once they come in, he's like, oh, are we walking? I don't want to walk. So
he knows what he wants.
Yeah. Rare cameo from Thor, who usually doesn't have the energy to be barking.
Usually don't hear a peep out of him. So the key question here is, if we had to make the call today, are you sticking with the projections and saying it's the Dodgers, and I'm staying with the Dodgers. I'm not moving off them. I just think they're going to have to sweat it out closer than the projections say. Do you think the Dodgers win the division? And how many other teams out of this group actually do make the postseason?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the Dodgers. I just think that when you do look at these last 30-day splits too closely, you just forget how good this team really is. And getting Mookie and Freddie back, I think, is huge. There was a little, in that time period, Mookie was hurt and there was some Freddie missing. So, when you look at that line and you say, oh, the bottom four aren't great. Well, now replace some of that bottom four with Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman. How does the lineup look now? And what recently with both, with both these guys in, I feel like you start to be like, how do I pitch this lineup? Like, how do I get through this lineup? It is a really good lineup. And in the meantime, while they've been crappy, Gavin Lux has been getting a little better, and like they've been sorting through some of their pieces, and they acquired some pieces at the deadline. So if this lineup, the worst players in the lineup are Gavin Lux and Tommy Edman, I'm starting to think like this could be the best lineup in baseball again.
Yeah. Britt, what do you think? I mean, Dodgers to win the division, but other two teams still getting in behind them?
I think so. Like, I want to disagree just for contrarian's sake. Also because, let's face it, we're not even into September. We've seen some crazy stuff happen in September. We've seen collapses. We've seen teams storm in. I don't buy the projections that this is going to be a coast at all. I agree with you, DVR. I think it'd be pretty cool if a team that wasn't the Dodgers won the NL West. I have a hard time seeing the Dodgers, now that they're getting healthier, kind of continue to spiral and give away that lead. but I very much think that the Padres could win this division. It wouldn't surprise me. So you know what? I'm just going to go with the Padres just to be a little bit different. I think they're confident. I think they're playing with the momentum we talked about, and they have the potential to get even healthier and better.
Tatis is a big piece. I mean, if
Tatis is a huge piece.
If they can get him back, it could change things for that lineup.
So I'm going to go with them because it would be so boring if we just saw the Dodgers march to an NL West title. I like Arizona. It's funny, we're like counting out Arizona who went to the World Series last year, right? Like,
And
how is that
has
possible?
the second best pitching staff and the third best hitting over the last 3 days. Okay.
And this again speaks to my like, let's just make it AL and NL and the top teams get in, because it's like just wild if we get 3 teams, maybe even 4 teams in from that NL West, right? Like,
That's not probably how people perceived it going into the season. I don't think. I think people thought there'd be one wild card coming out of there most.
I think for trading away Jorge Soler, the Giants deserve to come up short. Like, just the spirit of it. It's like, your lineup's not that good. Keep the guy that has game-changing power. That
Farhan move.
Red
but
hot.
We found Gerard Encarnacion, who's hitting the ball really hard and kind of looks like Jorge Soler, and he costs $15 million a year less. So
no, I just don't. I don't like it. I'm not rooting against the Giants, but I'm more just looking at saying, hey, that's like the wrong thing to do if you're trying to make up ground and your problem is largely scoring runs. Don't try to have your cake and eat it too. It's not that big of a deal to keep Soler.
I think that there's going to be some leaner times coming from Elliot Ramos and Tyler Fitzgerald at the top of that lineup just because they're swing and miss. So, I know that they look great right now, but they're putting them 1-2 in the lineup, and that means they want every plate appearance they can to go to those 2 guys, and I'm not sure it's going to work out that well.
Yeah.
The series lineup kind of nice at the end of the season. So the second to last series of the year for the Padres on the road at Dodger Stadium. That could be the series where one of those teams potentially clinches it, or it could be Padres D-backs in the last series of the season in Arizona for the division, or just to make the playoffs. So
that would be I'm glad the schedule worked out that way. The Giants do not play the Dodgers again, but they do play Arizona, I think, 6 times. So
yeah, they've got them in the first week of September.
Giants are a little bit more, almost in the spoiler role, possibly.
Right. Or the Giants Cardinals could be looking for the last wild card spot final weekend of the year. It's a home series for the Giants, too. So I don't know. A lot of different ways this one can play out. It's more fun and a deeper division than we expected going in. But one more question for you before we go. We saw the Angels buy and then purge, trying to get below the luxury tax threshold last year, using August waiver dumps to do that. And it was weird. The Guardians kind of reaped the benefits of that, even though they didn't make the playoffs. Ken Rosenthal wrote about the possibility of the Rangers maybe shedding a few players to save some money before.
Oh my God.
August
Would
31st.
Max Scherzer be a waiver dump? Oof.
I don't think Scherzer was in that, but it's guys like David Robertson, Andrew Heaney, maybe Nathan Eovaldi. It might not be quite as extreme as the Angels, but do you think, whether it's the Rangers or other teams, this is something that more clubs might employ? Because now you have this extra month you played since the deadline. If you were kind of a bubble team, 15, 20% chance of making the playoffs at the deadline, you stayed in, you didn't sell, you can at least save 4, 5, 6 million, whatever it is in payroll for the final month of the season. Because if this is the norm, the way the players are awarded is frustrating. The fact that Cleveland just got 3 roster upgrades, even though they have to manage the roster and DFA and push guys off the 40-man, it's just kind of weird. It's like being in a fantasy league where someone who's out of it just drops a bunch of players 3 weeks before the end of the season,
and then the worst
person gets to pile up on them.
Team with money, the worst wildcard team with money gets to pick them up, basically.
Very odd.
It is.
I think that there is a calculation the team has to make that goes beyond just how much money we can save. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I do think that you can poison yourself a little bit as a free agency destination if you just cut guys like this. You know what I mean? Like, you're not, for the player, you're not trading them to somewhere where they know they're going somewhere. You're cutting them from your team. And then the player has to find out where he's going. You know what I mean? Like, they're in limbo. I bet you that it didn't make the Angels a nicer place to go for players. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I bet you players would roll their eyes at it. Like if the Rangers cut everybody and then they went into free agency next year and somebody got an offer from the Rangers and an equal offer from somewhere else, they might take the other offer, is what I'm saying. I think there could be some tarnishing of your legacy as a team if you just put 6 players out there. Like let's say it is Max Scherzer. You put Max Scherzer and Nate Eovaldi on waivers, right? Is there nothing resonates with this with you guys? What do you think?
I just flat out don't like it. But I'm with you on especially if you're signing a 1-year deal. Okay, they're just gonna put me on waivers because it's usually guys who are expiring, right? We don't see this with players that have years of control left.
Oh yeah,
it's totally. It's pending free agents, guys that you wouldn't give a qualifying offer to. That there's just no
1-year deals are lifebloods of some teams. Like most teams would love to finish like 2 or 3 roster spots with 1-year deals. Like the Giants love it, certain teams love it.
The only reason I would wonder if it doesn't make a big difference is because if we're talking about guys on 1-year deals, they're probably looking for their next home anyway. And you're talking about a month where they live in a hotel and possibly go play for a better team. So maybe the pros outweigh the cons, the hassle, the inconvenience. Like you knew the situation going in on a short-term deal. So
I would make it a priority to talk to the players.
Sure.
As an organization, I'd be like, listen, we could save some money here. You could go somewhere better. Do you want to? I would ask them.
What do you think, Britt? More of this to come, or was that just a blip last year with the Angels being that aggressive about shedding payroll?
I think MLB's going to change the rules, so I don't think it's worth a whole lot of debate, is what I think.
They don't like that. They didn't like that.
No. It's going to change.
Yeah, and the optics, I mean, Ken wrote about it. Ken Rosenthal wrote about for his piece today. It's just like the optics of the defending champions doing this. That's kind of a strange vibe as well. So I hope it's not a trend, but I did realize when Ken wrote that, I'm like, oh yeah, we're kind of in that window where there might be a team or two that thinks about doing that to save a few bucks. We are going to go. If you'd like to save some money on a subscription to The Athletic, you can do that at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. You can find Eno on Twitter at Eno Saris. Find Britt at Britt_Droli. Find me at Derek Van Riper. Find the pod at Rates and Barrels. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Thursday.
Thanks for listening.